When we are looking at the body, we need to be able to describe the location of a particular anatomical part. And in order to do this, we have descriptive words. And we also have what is referred to as anatomical position. So anatomical position is where we have a person that is standing up and that is facing you, the observer. And the other important thing about anatomical position is that the hands are in a particular location. So in anatomical position, the hands are down by the body and they are palm forward. So the reason for that is that then we can describe the relative position of, say, for example, the thumb to the pinky finger, the last digit of the hand. So and we also would want the arm down beside the body so that we could describe the location of, say, for example, the elbow in relationship to other parts of the body that are superior to that. So anatomical position is an important concept. So this is erect, facing the observer. And with palms out. Okay, if you've ever taken a yoga class, this is actually what is referred to as mountain pose. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so we also have anatomical descriptors. So for example, we could describe one body part relative to another. So we can talk about directional descriptions or orientation. Okay, so the front of our body is oftentimes referred to as anterior, and it is also said to be ventral. So this is easier to understand the ventral part, the belly side, I guess, if you were like an animal that stood on all fours, because we have the ventral surface, the belly surface, and then we have the dorsal, which is your back. So we have anterior, which is also ventral. This is versus posterior, which would also be called dorsal. So when we describe these, this is relative. So for example, I would say that my nose is anterior to, say, for example, then my occipital lobe of my brain, which would be posterior. So it's all like one part of the body is relative to another. So for example, my umbilicus, which is my navel, would be anterior to my sacrum, which is the bone that connects the vertebral column to my pelvis. Okay. So anterior, posterior. We also have head and tail, which is cranial and then caudal. So cranial versus caudal. So that caudal is another term for that is tail. So we do have a tailbone, but that is low on the vertebral column, right? We also can talk about superior versus inferior. So I would say that, say, for example, my heart is superior to my diaphragm. My diaphragm, which is the respiratory muscle, is inferior to my heart. So superior versus inferior, those are two important words. We could also talk about lateral versus medial. So lateral is off to the side. My ears are lateral to my nose. My nose is medial to my ears. Okay, lateral versus medial. Now, when we're talking about the appendages, your arms and the legs, we oftentimes talk about something that is called proximal versus distal. So in your textbook, you can look up the definitions of these, but proximal means closer to that location where the appendage is attached to the center part of your body. So I would say that my elbow is actually distal. It is further away from the attachment point than my shoulder. My shoulder is proximal compared to my elbow. So those two terms are generally reserved for your arms and your legs. So I wouldn't say that, for example, my heart is, I don't know, proximal to my face, right? But that wouldn't make sense. My heart would be inferior to my head region. Okay. So those are some terminology, some terms that we're going to be talking about when we talk about the different structures, the different anatomical structures. Now, we also have what is referred to as regional terminology. So we have regional terminology. And this regional terminology is actually very useful in a medical setting because these tend to be what are used to describe structures even in a given particular area of your body. So for example, a regional terminology for, if we're talking about the armpits, we might not say armpit, we would say this is the axillary region. And in this axillary region, we have axillary blood vessels. We also have axillary nerves, right? So knowing where that is important to learning the terminology for the different blood vessels or the different nerves, or even the muscles. So we could talk about the upper arm. And this is generally referred to as the brachial region, right? And when we talk about the brachial region, we might talk about the muscle, which is called the biceps brachii. And that is different than the muscle that is called the biceps femoris. So the biceps femoris is down in your femoral region of your body, which is your leg. So it's actually your thigh. So the thigh is the femoral region. Brachial region, femoral region, region, okay? So these are very useful to know, and you will be required to be able to identify these on a exam. But remember, the exam's open book and open notes, but if you learn them, it's going to make everything a little bit easier for you as we go through learning the different anatomical structures and where they are located in the body. So that has to do with regional terminology. We also talked about directional relationships and anatomical position.